Hello and welcome to 5-Year Club video number 336. Tonight we'll be talking about failure. Oh, that was awkward. Had a little bit of ice in there. Well, why are we going to talk about failure? Because it is really important. Ugh, there's a bunch of water on this thing. Gross. Okay. So if you are watching this channel, then you are kind of in one of several states, right? You're either saving less than 10% of your income, which means that you're failing to save enough of your income, and kind of equivalently, you're failing to earn enough income that you could save 10%. But maybe you're making plenty of money and you're just failing to cut your spending. Or, right, perhaps you are at the level where you are saving like 20% of your income, but you are failing to retire early. You're still on like a 30-year retirement plan, and you're failing to gain more freedom for yourself and more of a safety cushion. Or perhaps, you're at, the level where you're saving 50% of your income, so you're doing pretty well there, but you are failing to go to the next level. You're failing to start an entrepreneurial endeavor. You're failing to use that money in a way that's more productive than just stashing it in a bank or stashing it in the stock market. In short, like, you're in a steady state and you're failing to accelerate. And for each of us, we can look at where we are, and then we can back up from there, and we can see kind of how we got to where we are. And we can see things that we could have done that we failed to do, that we didn't do. We can see things that we thought we needed to do and that have been successful for us. But at the end of the day, everybody is currently in some state of failure. And if you're not, that means that you're not ambitious. It means that you're not trying things that are so significantly more difficult than where you're at, that they're causing you to fail, because everybody fails when they try something hard the first few times. Nobody breezes through absolutely everything that life puts in front of them. People can make it seem that way, but that's not how it actually is. We ebb and flow with our successes. And I'm not saying that you need to struggle all the time, right? I'm just saying if things have been easy for too long, if you don't find some failure in your life, or you don't know the next thing that you're planning on failing at, then you need to think about that. And when you do fail, right, because it's inevitable, it's going to come with some unpleasant feelings, and we need to learn how to manage those feelings. We need to know how to think about those feelings when they come so that they don't compromise us. And part of that is a knowledge of psychology. So tonight we are reading an article where a psychologist discusses failure. In an attempt to better understand why we should embrace failure, we sat down with psychologist Kim Stevenson to find out what exactly happens in our brains when we fail, and why some people struggle so much with failure while others seem to take it in their stride. This is from virgin.com/entrepreneur. So, Kim, what's actually going on inside us when we fail? How does it affect us? Trying not to get too technical, basically, human beings evolved to survive. That's what natural selection is about. Human beings all have an optimism bias, which basically means we all expect that we're going to succeed. We never think that we're going to fail. That's why people are always late. They think that it's an hour's journey, so they mean to leave themselves an hour, but they actually leave themselves 55 minutes and turn up late. But we always assume that it's going to go right. That optimism bias protects our ego. It's actually quite scary to think that you're out of control. What happens is everybody tends to assume that what they do is good, and people assume that they make decisions logically, particularly men, so they tend to be overconfident. So if it doesn't work out, it tends to come as a bit of a shock to people. This is the same as what would have happened back when we were cavemen. We evolved as hunter-gatherers, so because we're expecting that things are going to go right, We're expecting that when we go hunting, we're going to catch something. We're expecting that when we gather food, we're going to remember where the stuff we want to gather is. We're not expecting that we're going to get lost and wander around for 3 hours. And when it doesn't work, that's actually quite painful. We'd already evolved systems to deal with physical pain before we really encountered social threat, the fight or flight response, or fight, flight, or freeze. That's to deal with physical threat. But we see social threat in the same way because as we evolved, the physical system had already developed. So what happens is the social pain and humiliation when we get it wrong activates exactly the same things in our brain as physical threats to our lives. So if we fail, we have this humiliation response and this pain experience almost like someone has hit us. We're expecting everything to go well and we're ticking along nicely, and it's almost like suddenly a saber-toothed tiger appears. All the neurotransmitters and chemicals in the brain when we fail are the same as that sort of fear, and it really hurts. It's a really physical reaction. It's the same sort of pain. That's why some people, when they're humiliated or cry or feel sick. That's why some people, when they're humiliated, cry or feel sick. There's no other reason for that. Your body is getting you ready for fight or run, to fight or run. But what about people who have failed continually? Don't they come to expect failure again? Sure, some people will have a failure, they'll feel sick, they'll be upset with themselves, they'll beat themselves up. They will get caught up in this failure. There's a thing in counseling psychology that says that depression is about it being personal, permanent, and pervasive. And you can find that failure can lead to a downward spiral that can cause depression. Take, for example, someone who fails in a relationship, a guy whose girlfriend dumps him. It's I'm worthless, so it's personal. It's everything I do. I'm useless with girls, no good at work, and rubbish at sports. Nobody likes me. So it's everything that he touches because of this one instance of failure, and it's permanent. It's never going to be any different. I'm never going to have a relationship because I messed it up with her. That's a pattern that can occur. In the same way, if someone fails in business, it can kick off a similar spiral, and that essentially leads to doing the hunter-gatherer equivalent of going back to their cave and just sitting there because they're not going to go out hunting again because they got it wrong. Obviously, the human brain is the most complicated thing in the known universe. Not sure about that. So there isn't a simple answer for why that is, but that's what's happening. If people go into a spiral and they believe those things, it's easy to see that it's going to be a lot of work for them to come back from that. So anyone who manages to not get caught in this downward spiral has embraced failure and learnt from it. Not necessarily. There are some people who, like the bankers, will get arrogant about it and say that it wasn't their fault. It was just circumstance, and they'll carry on and ignore what happened. This is where those glib expressions come from. You get all these things like, if at first you don't succeed, try again. But you've also got the expression, the definition of madness is doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different result. So for entrepreneurs, there's a fine line between stubborn, bullheaded, and arrogant, and believing that if you try hard enough, you will succeed. But the thing with finance, or indeed with launching a startup, is that there are what people refer to as risks, but technically risks refer to something that you can calculate mathematically. What you've got otherwise is uncertainty, and the real world is full of uncertainty. So how can startups deal with this uncertainty and the fact that they may fail? The problem with the real world is that somebody can change the rules in the middle. You never really know what the odds are when you start. Anyway, though. You've assumed that the world is not chaotic in the technical sense, and it's not complex in the technical sense, and it's predictable, and that what you're doing is all a calculated risk. You haven't realized that really what you're doing is inventing some numbers. That's uncertainty. The thing is that there's different ways to react to when that goes wrong. I think that the important thing for people recovering from that is to realize that is a level of uncertainty. Actually, if it goes well, a lot of that is down to chance. It's not because you're a genius. A lot of people assume that serial entrepreneurs have done so well because they're geniuses and they know how to do it. But the thing is, you have to look at it in terms of what you can afford to gamble. If you've made several million from your first venture, you can afford to gamble $500,000 on a few other projects and you might get 5 or 6 wrong, but you could get one that goes well. And because you have the startup capital to make it work, it could go on to make more money. If they hadn't been lucky to begin with, they wouldn't have had a chance to do well in the others because they would have gone bankrupt. It's not saying it's all about luck. It's saying that failing, like Edison said, might be telling you that you need to try harder, but it also might be that you have to persist if at first you don't succeed. One of the things for people to realize is that there's no easy formula to work out whether they should keep trying because they could be just being pig-headed. What people have to do is to be as cold-blooded about it as they can, to examine their assumptions and to accept that they have failed, and there could be all sorts of reasons for this. This is where having a group of critical friends is crucial. You need people who are willing to be brutally honest about where you might have gone wrong. And I think this is like an important, like your net worth is your network. This is part of your network. You need these people in your lives. You need these relationships in your lives. Success with money is not a solo sport. There's not a lot of point in beating yourself up about it. The thing to do, to use the Edison quote, is not blindly persist, but work out if this is one of the 99 times you have to fail in order to succeed, or if it wasn't. Okay, let's read that sentence again. But work out if this is one of the 99 times you have to fail in order to succeed, or if it is that it wasn't a good idea in the first place, or maybe it wasn't the right time. So there are many possibilities, and we shouldn't limit ourselves to saying that our failures mean one very specific thing. We have to open ourselves up that failure can come from many different sources, that we're not able to control the variables from the beginning anyway, and that there are also many different ways to respond to failure in terms of doubling down on the same thing, or taking a look up and changing 15% of it, or perhaps just figuring out that you've already tried that several times, and this is no longer the most promising opportunity on your horizon. All right, well, that is it for number 336. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this will get you thinking more broadly about the role of failure in your life, the necessity of failure in your life, and also about all the different options you have to respond to your failure. Have a fabulous evening.